So at the end of the last drift event, I heard a noise inside the right rear. And it sounded like a wheel bearing noise. It was rotational. And it might be because I had a rack on the right side and the wheel did take a hit for sure. The wheel did for sure take a hit, sadly. And there's one more scratch on here somewhere. Oh, and then one more right here. The wheel did take a pretty big hit, and that was on the right rear at the time. And this wheel bearing is making noise, or it sounds like it is, and there's also play. There's also play going up and down. And you can see the ball joint moving, but also the wheel bearing is making noise. So I got 2 new wheel bearings, and then I have used upper control arms from a subframe that I got because I broke my subframe. I'm gonna throw on these. I'm gonna check the nut, see if that's just loose for the upper control arm. You can see this upper ball joint moving whenever I move the wheel. I'm gonna check and see if the nut's just loose, but let's find out. Of course the axle nut doesn't want to come off. Got penetrating oil on it. Got a good battery. Not moving. Alright, I finally got the nut off. I guess my battery really wasn't fully charged, so I charged it a little bit more. Got it off. Got off one caliper, now I gotta take off this other one. I had the e-brake applied, but if you disengage it, then take this off. Now that the axle nut's off, you can push a little bit forward. And that'll help with getting to the nuts on the back side for the wheel bearing. And also, I can't get to the bolt very easily for the upper control arm. So I'm gonna remove the axle so I can get a socket in there instead of a wrench. I ended up just removing my axle because I couldn't get to this nut very easily, so make it easier for myself and just take the axle out earlier. So I got this wheel bearing puller. It makes it a lot easier to pull wheel bearings. It's not mine. I wish I had one, but it's a friend of mine, so it's gonna help it pull out the hub a little bit easier. And I'm also not using my lug nuts for the car. I have Muteki open lug nuts just because it's a little bit easier, and if I do get extended wheel studs, it's gonna help out in the end, so don't wanna mess those up and use my old ones that just came on the car. Holy smokes, one hit. And this is installed one way on the car because this right side has the holes closer together than the left side. And then over here, if you flip this around, that translates. So the closer holes are on the left and the farther ones are on the right. So the nut was just spinning on there. So I jacked the suspension up a little bit. Hopefully it's enough to break the bolt loose. Hopefully it's enough to twist it off, but the stud is just spinning right now with the nut. There we go. Sweet. I don't want to fully drop that yet. Need to break that bolt and nut, and then this bolt and nut right here. Now I should be able to just drop the control arm. I forgot that you needed to unbolt the sway bar end link, so that's unbolted. Now we should be able to remove it. There we go. So I got this old new one from the subframe that I got from the 350Z. It's all that I have in time to put on before the drift event, so that's what I'm gonna put on. Let's fish this back in here. I got the new control arm all bolted up. Now I gotta put on all the calipers. Now I just gotta see if this new old control arm has play in it or not inside the ball joint. So I was gonna go put my calipers back on, and I didn't realize earlier that my rotational noise probably wasn't my wheel bearing, so replace that for nothing, but I have a good one. Or this one's still good. But my caliper is seized back here. This pad for my e-brake has nothing on it. And the other side does. So I need a new caliper. At least I know the wheel bearings weren't making noise and the axle spacers aren't causing problems, and I just need a new caliper, that's all. Also, luckily I have some spare parts because the threads got ripped out of this axle nut and the threads of the axle, so I have a spare one just in case things break, and I'm gonna throw this one in instead with a new nut as well from the junkyard. So that means I gotta throw the axle spacer on this one. Let's see if this shake is still there in the wheel. I just got everything back together, and I realized that my brake pad has no life left on it anymore. And then the other side, I just thought that maybe I needed brake pads, and then they were the problem, but my caliper is seized. And then I tried moving it in and out, and it is definitely seized. So I picked up a caliper and some pads so I can put on a new caliper on this side and then some pads. I didn't really diagnose it correctly. I did it at the track whenever I was at the last drift event. I ordered parts on the way back home because there's drift day, which is the last one of the season, on Sunday. So I ordered it on a whim, thinking I had wheel bearings, and then when I took off the caliper, it wasn't really stuck, so I didn't really look at it. I definitely should have, but yeah, definitely my fault. Should not have gotten a wheel bearing, because the wheel bearing also didn't really feel bad whenever I took it off the car. But that is definitely a telltale sign of my rotational noise, was my handbrake caliper was seized. And then my life on my other brake pads are all good. So let's take off the brake line and put on a new caliper on this side. Then whenever I'm taking off this caliper, to prevent twisting this line that I have going into the chassis, I'm just gonna twist out this whole entire caliper. And I'll do the same thing with the new one, so I'm not twisting this line. This kit also came with a new crush washer, so might as well use it so you don't have any leaks. So I got it all mounted up, and we can sneak on the brake hardware. I still want some type of grease on here, so I'm putting a light coat, but I don't want it to melt because I know it's gonna get super hot back here. Got everything all mounted back up. I noticed that my preload adjuster for my coil was loose, so I tightened that back up and set it. Matched it to the left side. I can put it back together and test drive it, see if I can hear this noise anymore. But pretty sure this was the problem. A worn brake pad.